"Sir, my mother didn't come home," cried the alien girl. The human's response changed. Rain fell in thin, relentless lines over the lower tiers of Orlin Hydro District. It hit the metal walkways with a steady, hollow sound and pooled along the seams of the plates, turning every step into a measured choice between wet and wetter. The air smelled of rust, damp concrete, and the faint chemical tang from the water plants that never slept. A row of stacked towers loomed over the tier, their sides crowded with pipes and cables. Blue and green service lights blinked in slow patterns along the supports, marking pressure levels and flow rates for anyone who cared to look. Most people didn't. They kept their heads down, collars up, and walked fast. Arden Vale stood under the shallow awning of a harbor checkpoint, finishing his last inspection for the evening cycle. The light from the console threw a muted glow across his face as he scrolled through readings of the harbor beacons and fog markers. He checked each line twice before approving it. Years of work had trained his mind to look for patterns that didn't fit, small deviations that led to accidents. Ships depended on those lights. So did the workers on the docks. If one tower went dark in heavy rain, people could die. The thought kept his focus sharp even when he was tired. He shifted his weight, feeling damp cloth pull against his shoulders. His long black coat was soaked along the bottom half. Water dripped steadily from the hem onto his boots. The fabric under his coat, a simple gray work shirt and dark pants, stuck lightly to his skin, warmed only by his own body heat and the faint warmth coming off the checkpoint circuitry. He tapped the final code into the console, watched the confirmation light flash green, and allowed himself the thought of going home to a quiet room, dry clothes, and reheated Kiri's meat stew. A small voice cut through the rain. "Sir, my mother didn't come home." The sentence was not loud, but it had a weight that pulled his attention away from the console in an instant. He turned his head. Under a flickering street lamp about 10 meters away, a little girl stood alone. The light above her stuttered between bright and dim, making her look like she appeared and disappeared in place as the current struggled. She was small, perhaps 7 or 8. Her skin held a soft rose-pink tone that marked her as a Renyu variant, the same people who usually work the pump lines deeper in the district. Her long golden hair hung in wet strands around her face, plastered to her cheeks and neck. The short tunic she wore, patched at the shoulders and hem, was soaked through and clung to her thin frame. Her bare feet stood in a shallow puddle, toes slightly curled from the cold. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the adults moving past. People glanced at her, then away, quick and uncomfortable. One man tightened his grip on his bag. A pair of women stepped wider around her, as if her presence might create trouble they didn't have time for. Arden felt a tightness in his chest. He had seen neglected kids before in this district, but there was something in the way she stood, exhausted but stubbornly upright, that hit him harder than he expected. He closed the console, locked it, and stepped out from under the awning into the rain. Water hit his hair and face, then slid down the side of his neck and under his collar. He barely noticed. As he approached, the girl watched him with a guarded, direct gaze. Her eyes were a clear violet, pupils slightly vertical in the way of her kind. She didn't flinch, but her fingers dug into the thin fabric over her arms. "How long have you been out here?" Arden asked. His voice was low, not gentle exactly, but controlled and steady. The kind of tone he used with shaken ship crews and panicked harbor workers. He stopped close enough to shield her from some of the wind, but not so close that she had to back away. She swallowed, throat tight. "I waited at home until the lamps went low," she said. "Then I went to the pump doors. They said she's still working. That was hours ago." Her words came out flat, like she had repeated them already to several people. Her lips had gone pale from the cold. Her small nose was red at the tip. "Who said she's still working?" Arden asked. "Workers at the pump gate," she answered. "They said she's probably slow and will come when she's done." Then they closed the hatch. He felt his jaw clench. He knew how shift supervisors talked. If a worker didn't show, they blamed the worker, not the system. "What's your mother's name?" he asked. "Marilla. And yours?" "Lyra." Her fingers trembled harder now that someone had stopped. "Stress worked that way." When the body realized it wasn't invisible anymore, it often shook. "You're freezing," Arden said. He shrugged out his coat in one practiced motion and placed it over her shoulders. The weight of it dragged down on her arms, but the inside was still warmer than the air. She pulled the front together with one quick, almost desperate motion, holding it shut with both hands. The contact made her breath catch. The coat still held his body heat and the faint mix of salt, metal, and spice from his workday. Compared to the wet air, it felt almost like a heater. "You work the lights?" she asked, glancing at the badge near his collar. "Yes," he said. "Harbor Light Inspector. Evening cycle." Her gaze moved to the console behind him, then back to his face. She seemed to judge whether his job made him someone who might actually help or just someone with another excuse. "Everyone says they're busy," she murmured. "You're busy too." "Oh," as Arden said. "Now I'm listening to you." He saw the way her shoulders dropped half a centimeter. It was small, but it told him she'd been carrying tension for a while. "Lyra," he said, choosing his next words carefully. "Tell me where your mother works exactly." "Pump Corridor 12, she said immediately. "Behind the algae stairs. She cleans the lower valves and the floor. She always comes back through the service arch near the food stalls." "Where do you live?" he asked. "2 levels up in a worker's block. She told me to stay there tonight." Lyra looked away briefly, ashamed. "I tried. I couldn't. She doesn't stay out this late." Arden felt the familiar pull between mind and gut. He could call district security, file an alert, and wait for them to do a half-hearted welfare check sometime tomorrow. Or he could go now. He already knew which it would be. He had chosen his way of working years ago when he saw his first overloaded cargo barge come in unseen by a broken light. If something needed doing, he did it. Standing there while a child froze on his tier wasn't an option. "Lyra," he said, voice firm but not harsh. "We're going to follow your mother's route. You show me everywhere she went tonight. We don't stop until we find her or we have a real answer. Do you understand?" She studied his face again. He let her look. Heavy rain tapped on the checkpoint metal above them. Voices faded in and out as workers passed. For a moment, the world felt narrowed to this decision. "Yes," she said. She tightened her grip on his coat. "I understand. Stay close," Arden said. "If you get tired, you tell me, not later. And if you feel sick, you say it as soon as it starts." She nodded once. "If we find her and she can't walk," she asked, "will you carry her?" Her tone was quiet but direct. She knew what collapse looked like. That realization added another weight in his chest. "Yes," Arden said. "I will." He turned back long enough to lock the checkpoint frame and send a brief status ping to Harbor Control. Cycle complete. Off console for welfare check. No details. No apologies. Then he rested his hand lightly between Lyra's shoulder blades and guided her away from the lamp and into the busier flow of the tier. They passed under a row of vendor awnings. Smells mixed. The sharp odor of cheap alcohol, spices from grilled street food, damp fabric hanging to dry. Lyra kept her eyes forward, holding the coat's front with both hands. Whenever someone brushed past too close, her shoulders pulled in. Arden adjusted his position each time to keep himself between her and the heaviest foot traffic. They reached the edge of the main walkway, where a narrow stairway dropped down into a lower service lane. The steps glowed faintly green from algae stuck in the cracks and from light strips along the walls. "She goes down here when the lifts are crowded," Lyra said. "She says it's faster." Arden looked at the wet steps. The handrail along the right side was rusted and slick. Water streamed down in thin lines from a pipe overhead. "Hold the rail," he said, "and take it slow." He walked one step behind her, letting his body shield her from the drip line. The soles of his boots scraped lightly against the metal. He kept his eyes on her feet to make sure she didn't slip, then scanned the shadows below them. He thought briefly about his own days. His job usually ended with the quiet hum of consoles, a quick walk home, a meal straight from a reheat tray. He had chosen it because he liked structure, not because he wanted to play rescuer in the rain. Here he was anyway. At the bottom, the stairway opened into a service arch with a low ceiling. The air cooled noticeably. Condensation dripped from pipes overhead in slow, regular drops that hit the floor and spread along the concrete. Several workers stood under the arch, drinking from steaming cups. The liquid inside smelled sweet and strong, cheap fruit alcohol that took the edge off 12-hour shifts. Their clothes were stained and damp. Their eyes tracked Arden and Lyra as they passed, more curious than hostile. Lyra walked closer to Arden now, almost brushing his side. Her bare feet slapped lightly against the floor. "She waits there when they change shifts," she said, pointing to a patch of wall near a support pillar. The supervisor stands higher up and shouts orders. Arden followed her line of sight. A short platform jutted out from the wall a few meters away, with a small railing and a basic control panel. The metal surface showed dents and scratches from fists and boots. He scanned the floor near the wall. No obvious signs of struggle. No personal items left behind. A woman working a grill at the edge of the arch glanced at them, then returned to flipping skewers of Kiri's meat over a small heater. The fat sizzled as it hit the hot surface, sending up a heavy, savory smell. Arden walked over. "Evening," he said. "You were here all shift." The woman eyed him, then at his badge. "Most of it." "What?" "I'm looking for Marilla," he said. "Pump cleaning shift." Oreni, rose-pink skin, gold hair, silver work wrap. He gestured toward Lyra. Her daughter's waiting for her. The vendor's eyes softened a fraction when she looked at the girl. She turned back to Arden. "Supervisor lit into someone like that earlier," she said. Kept yelling that she was dragging the line down. She looked exhausted, nearly dropped her tools. When the pumps came back up, he shoved her back into the corridor. "That's the last I saw." "Did she leave?" Arden asked. "Walk past you alone?" "Toward the main tier." "I don't watch the door every second," the woman said. "But if she came out, she didn't stop here. Nobody carried her either. This place doesn't carry you. They step over you." The matter-of-fact way she said it tightened something in his stomach. "Thank you," he said. He pulled a small credit chip from his pocket and placed it on her counter for a skewer. When she handed him the freshly grilled Kiri's meat, he walked back to Lyra and held it out. "Eat," he said. She stared at it. The meat glistened with rendered fat, edges crisped slightly, smell thick and inviting. "I'm not hungry," she said automatically. He gave her a flat look. "You walked all over the district in the rain and your hands are shaking. Take small bites. It will help." After a pause, she accepted it with both hands, as if he might change his mind and pull it away. She bit into the meat carefully. The warmth spread across her face as she chewed. Grease shone on her lower lip. She swallowed and took another bite, faster this time. Arden watched long enough to be sure she was actually eating, then turned toward the pump corridor entrance. A sign above the doorway flickered. "Pump access, shift crew only." Yellow paint marked the threshold. Beyond it, the air grew louder, filled with the constant thrum of machines forcing water through the district. "Is this where she went in?" Arden asked. Lyra nodded, clutching the skewer. "She told me I can come as far as the yellow line. Not past it. Tonight you're with me," he said. "Stay on my left side and keep one hand on the wall if the floor shakes too much. Do not leave my reach." They stepped past the sign. Inside, the pump corridor was narrow and crowded with metal. Large pipes ran along both walls and overhead, humming under the strain. Moisture seeped from joints and collected in small, constant streams that crossed the floor and pooled in the low spots. The sound here wasn't just noise. It felt like pressure under the skin, a low vibration in the ribs. The floor shook gently with each surge of water. Dim overhead strips gave off a cold, uneven light. "Marilla," Arden called out, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the machinery. "Marilla, cleaning crew." His voice bounced down the corridor and broke apart against the metal. Lyra's free hand found the wall. Her knuckles brushed damp metal. She lifted the skewer to her mouth again, almost without thinking, chewing while her eyes tracked the floor. Arden walked slowly, scanning ahead for anything out of place. Rags on the ground, drop tools, footprints in the thin film of water. Near a cluster of valves, he saw a flash of silver on the floor. He crouched and picked it up. A strip of cloth, soaked and torn at one end. It had the same dull shine as the work wraps worn by pump cleaners. Lyra saw it and stopped breathing for a moment. Her eyes fixed on Arden's hand. "That's hers," she whispered. How do you know? He asked, though he already believed her. She tied that side shorter so it wouldn't get caught on the pipes, Lyra said. See? It's cut crooked. I watched her fix it last week. Her voice was quiet but certain. She had the kind of small detail memory that came from long, anxious observation. Arden's pulse picked up. He stood, scanned the area, and moved faster now, his attention sweeping the gaps behind each cluster of equipment. The broken ceiling panel was near the far end of the corridor. Rain from the upper tiers slipped through the gap and fell in thin streams, hitting the floor with a different rhythm than the steady leaks. A faint draft pushed the cold air sideways. Behind the largest pump valve beneath that panel, he saw the outline of a body. Lyra, stay there, Arden said, voice firm. Do not move from that spot. He didn't wait to see if she obeyed. He crossed the distance in long strides and dropped to one knee beside the fallen woman. Marilla lay curled on her side, partially shielded by the valve housing. Water from the broken panel had soaked the concrete around her. Some of it had splashed onto her legs and the thin silver wrap around her hips. Her skin had a faint rose tone under the pallor. Her hair, golden and long, clung to her neck and cheek in heavy strands. Her shoulder wrap had slipped, exposing most of one shoulder and part of her upper chest. Her breathing was shallow, lips slightly parted, color drained. Arden pressed 2 fingers gently to her neck. The pulse he felt was weak and irregular, but there. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Is she alive? Lyra's voice cracked behind him. He glanced back. She had moved closer despite his order, standing halfway down the corridor, the skewer hanging forgotten in her hand. Her eyes were wide and fixed on her mother. Yes, Arden said. She's alive. Relief hit her so hard her knees wobbled. She caught herself with one hand on the wall and took a few stiff steps toward them. Stay back from the broken panel, Arden said. The floor's slick. He slid one arm under Marilla's shoulders and the other under her knees. Her body was cold through the wet fabric. As he lifted her, her head fell against his chest, hair sticking to his shirt. She weighed less than he expected for an adult who worked physical shifts. Her skin under his hand felt clammy. Her breathing hitched once, then steadied into a weak rhythm. He adjusted his grip, making sure her head was supported and her limbs were contained under his arms. He positioned his body so the rain blowing and hit his back, not her. Lyra, he said, we're taking her out of here and somewhere warm. Where? Lyra asked. My flat, he said. It's closer than anything else I trust. He saw the hesitation in her eyes. Going to a stranger's home was a risk, but he also saw the calculation, a child's version of triage, pump corridor floor versus a man who actually stopped. The choice was simple. Okay, she said. I'll come. Arden turned and moved down the corridor, carrying Marilla. Lyra walked directly behind him, one hand on his coat, the other still holding the half-eaten skewer as if she had forgotten to set it down. They passed under the arch again. Some workers looked up. One of them raised his eyebrows at the sight of Arden carrying a cleaner. Shift's over, the man said. You're a bit late for hero work, Inspector. Arden didn't stop. If you see her supervisor, he said, not looking back, tell him she's alive because someone else did his job. He didn't wait for an answer. The climb to his flat was long, especially with Marilla's weight in his arms, but his body knew how to manage it. Years of hauling equipment and emergency gear up and down ladders and tower stairs had built a quiet strength under his calm exterior. Each step sent a dull jolt into his legs. Water from his coat ran down his sleeves and dripped from his elbows. Marilla's hair brushed his knuckles on every stride. Lyra's breathing stayed close behind, quick and uneven. He was aware of his mission in the official sense. Protect safe passage in the harbor, keep lights running, keep people moving. Tonight he had added something else to it. Get this woman and her child out of a corridor that would kill her if he left her there. By the time they reached his level, his shoulders ached pleasantly and his hands were numb from cold. The corridor to his door was quiet. Only the distant hum of the water plants filtered through the walls. He stopped at a plain metal door, keyed in his code, and shouldered it open. Warmth hit them immediately. His flat was small, One main room with a fold-out bed and an alcove, a simple table by a narrow window, a modest cooking unit, and a single chair. But it was dry, and the air carried the faint smell of reheated food and cleaning solvent. Inside, Arden said. Lyra stepped in first, eyes darting quickly around the room. She stayed near the doorway, as if ready to run, then saw the heater unit by the wall and the thick blankets folded on the bed. The sight calmed her more than words could have. Arden carried Marilla to the bed and laid her down carefully. Her wet clothes stained the blanket within seconds. Her head rolled slightly to the side, lips moving in a faint, broken whisper that never formed into a word. "She's not waking up," Lyra said, voice thin. "She doesn't need to wake up yet," Arden said. "She needs warmth and time." He moved fast. He grabbed a crate from under the bed and pulled out thermal stones, setting 3 into the base heater beside the mattress. When he activated them, they glowed faint orange and started to radiate heat. The temperature in the alcove rose steadily. Arden turned to Lyra. "I need to get her out of these wet clothes," he said. "You don't have to watch that. Turn around for a minute." Lyra nodded and faced the wall, clutching his coat around herself with both hands. Arden worked quickly. He untied the torn silver wrap at Marilla's hips and stripped it away, then eased the wet shoulder piece off her arms. Underneath, she wore thin, functional underclothes, more about ease of drying than modesty. The wet fabric clung to the curves of her body in a way that stirred a natural response in him. He controlled it. This wasn't about him. He took a clean towel from a shelf and dried her skin in firm, efficient strokes, starting with her arms and shoulders, then her legs and feet. Her body reacted slowly, skin shifting from chilled to slightly warmer under his hands. He reached into a small wardrobe and pulled out the softest long-sleeved shirt he owned, a black work shirt worn thin by years of use. He slipped it over her head, guiding her arms into the sleeves without jarring her. The shirt fell past mid-thigh, covering most of her. Then he wrapped her in 2 thick blankets and pulled them up to her collarbone, tucking the edges under her sides to keep the heat in. "You can turn around now," he said. Lyra did. Her eyes went straight to her mother's face. The sight of Marilla dressed in someone else's shirt with color, slowly returning to her cheeks, hit the girl hard. She swallowed and moved closer, then climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed and took her mother's hand. Her small fingers barely wrapped around Marilla's. Arden stepped back, giving them space. He moved to the cooking unit and filled a pot with stored Orvan water, then added chunks of dried larn root and small strips of Kiri's meat from his ration stock. As the pot heated, the smell of broth and meat filled the flat, richer and more comforting than the stale air of the corridor. He poured himself a small cup of Ferland seed coffee from a side kettle and took a sip, letting the bitterness push away the lingering adrenaline. Behind him, Lyra spoke softly, more to herself than to him. "She's breathing," she said. "Her chest is moving." "That's good." Arden brought the pot back to the bed and ladled some broth into a cup. He cooled it with a splash of water, then sat on the edge of the mattress. "Let's see if she can drink," he said. He slid one hand behind Marilla's head, fingers spreading through her damp hair to support her neck. With the other hand, he tilted the cup to her lips. "Marilla," he said, voice low and firm. "You're not in the pumps anymore. You're safe. Drink a little." Her eyelids fluttered. Her mouth parted. She took a shallow sip, then another. Some broth ran down the side of her mouth. He caught it with his thumb and wiped it away. Her eyes opened a crack. She focused slowly on him, then on Lyra. "You found someone," she whispered, throat rough. Lyra's grip tightened around her mother's hand. "I told you not to fall," she said, trying to sound scolding and failing. Marilla tried to pull the blanket up when she noticed the shirt she wore, realizing it wasn't her own. Embarrassment flashed across her face. Her cheeks colored faintly. "I'm in your bed," she said to Arden, voice strained. "And in your clothes. This is not decent. You were freezing on a concrete floor," Arden said. "My priorities are in that order." His answer was plain, without any attempt at charm. He set the empty cup aside. "You owe me nothing," he added. "Not for this." She watched him for a long second, as if testing that statement against what she knew of men in the district. Her eyes softened slightly, but stayed wary. "What were you doing there?" she asked. "At that checkpoint." At that hour. Harbor lights, he said. I cover this sector. Evening checks. I was signing off when Lyra spoke to me. He didn't mention that he could have logged off and walked away. It didn't feel important to say. Either she would see it or she wouldn't. And you? He asked. Why push through a shift like that if you were already unsteady? Her gaze moved to Lyra. The answer sat in that look. She's not allowed on the upper tiers without me, Marilla said. If I miss too many days, they review our room. They decide if we deserve to stay. I thought if I finished one more cycle, we'd be safe longer. Lyra flinched at the word. Arden saw it. You're not going back to that corridor tomorrow, he said. Your legs won't support it. Neither will your lungs. Marilla opened her mouth to argue, then coughed instead. The effort shook her shoulders and made her wince. He watched her struggle through it and made a decision. He planned to guide her through the steps she needed to regain her independence. But for now, that meant taking control she might not like. You and Lyra stay here tonight, he said. After that, we see what makes sense. No blood tie. Arden leaned back in the chair beside the bed, setting his coffee aside. I work the harbor lights, he said. My job is to keep people from smashing themselves on the rocks because no one warned them where the edge is. Today, the edge was a pump corridor. Same idea. It wasn't a speech. It was just how he saw it. Marilla's eyes closed halfway. You talk like someone who used to wear a different uniform, she murmured. I did, he said. Long time ago. I got tired of orders that didn't care who fell. That brief piece of history hung in the air and then settled. It explained enough. The heater hummed quietly. Rain tapped on the window in small, uneven beats. The smell of broth lingered. Marilla's eyes finally closed fully. Her breathing steadied. Some color lingered in her cheeks now. Not much, but enough. Arden sat in the chair and watched them both, mother and child, until the shift sirens changed in the distance and the night grew quieter. He had come to the checkpoint that evening to confirm lights and file reports. His mission had been to keep the harbor running. Now, without planning it, he had taken on something else. 2 lives that had been one shift away from disappearing into a system that did not care. He didn't know yet what shape that mission would take or how long it would last. He only knew that, for tonight, his priority was simple. He would not let them go back to the corridor. Rain softened outside the narrow window by the time dawn reached the lower tiers. The thin glow filtering through the glass stretched across Arden's floor in a pale strip. He sat in the same chair he had occupied the entire night, elbows resting on his knees, watching Marilla and Lyra breathe in quiet sync. His coat hung from a hook near the door, still dripping from the long walk through the district. Lyra shifted first, rubbing her face against the blanket and blinking as if waking in a place she didn't trust yet. When she saw her mother's chest rising steadily, her body loosened. She lifted her head and then looked at Arden. Her voice stayed low so she wouldn't disturb Marilla. You didn't sleep. Arden rolled his shoulders to ease the stiffness. Not yet. Are you always like this? She asked. Watching everything. Only when it matters. He stood, joints stiff from the cold and from holding the same position too long. He moved to the small cooking unit and reheated the leftover broth. The smell of larn root filled the room again, thicker now after sitting overnight. Lyra climbed out of the bed carefully, keeping one hand on the mattress for balance. Arden noticed she still wore damp patches on her tunic. He pulled a folded towel from the shelf and handed it to her. Dry yourself, he said. You'll get sick if you stay in wet clothes. She hesitated, then did as he asked. The towel dragged over her tunic and hair with slow strokes. Her expression remained serious, older than her age. Arden poured the reheated broth into 2 small cups, set one near the bed for Marilla, and placed the other on the table. The broth steamed lightly. A few strips of Kiri's meat floated on top, soft after a night in the pot. Lyra stood at the table, looking at the steam. She won't eat unless someone helps her. I'll handle it, Arden said. Before he could return to the bed, Marilla stirred. Her eyes opened halfway, dazed for a moment before they found her daughter's shape, and then Arden moving in her peripheral vision. She tried to sit up. The effort made her breathing catch. Take it slow, Arden said, steadying her shoulder with one hand. His palm felt the warmth returning to her skin and the trembling still running through her muscles. Marilla looked around the small flat, as if confirming that the night before wasn't a dream. Her gaze landed on his shirt over her body. The collar hung loose on her shoulders, the sleeves covering her hands almost completely. She pulled the blanket up instinctively, not to hide, more to regain a sense of control after a long night of losing it. "I'm sorry I collapsed," she said quietly. "You didn't choose this." "I chose to help you," Arden answered. "That's enough." The directness in his tone made her look away. Lyra crawled onto the bed beside her, leaning gently into her side. Marilla pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead for a brief moment, a gesture that steadied her breathing. Arden set the cup of broth on the bedside table and slid an arm behind Marilla's back to help her sit. She resisted at first, embarrassed by her weakness, but he waited without comment until she nodded. When he lifted her, the fabric of his shirt shifted around her hips and her breath tightened again, not from pain, but from awareness. He held the cup near her mouth. She took a sip, then another. The warmth spread through her face, color rising gradually in her cheeks. "Did the supervisor see you fall?" Arden asked. Marilla shook her head. "No, he had already left the corridor. I pushed myself too far. I thought if I finished the shift, we could keep our place another month." She let out a controlled exhale. "We're already warned once." Lyra's fingers curled around the blanket. "They can't take our room," she said, but her voice carried no certainty. Arden met Marilla's eyes. "How many missed shifts before they review you?" "2," she said. "Yesterday was the first. If I miss today." "You're not going in today," Arden said. The firmness in his voice made Marilla tense. "If I don't show up, they'll say I'm unreliable." "You collapsed in a pump corridor during a storm," Arden replied. "If the district doesn't see the problem, I'll make them." She stared at him, weighing the risk of believing him. Lyra slid her hand across the blanket until she touched Marilla's wrist. "Mom, you can't work today. You can barely sit." The softness in the girl's voice hit Marilla harder than anything Arden said. A knock suddenly sounded at the door. Not loud, but sharp enough to make Arden shift his weight instantly and glance toward it. Lyra stiffened and gripped her mother's arm. Marilla's eyes widened, breath tightening. "No one visits us," she whispered. Arden raised a hand slightly to signal them to stay silent. He walked to the door, his posture changing, still calm, but controlled in a way that suggested readiness. He checked the wall screen beside the door. A single man stood outside wearing a gray maintenance jacket. Arden recognized him from the tier, a water technician who usually ran morning checks. Arden opened the door halfway. "You're up early," the technician said. Control sent a notice to confirm pump corridor 12 was cleared. "I figured you'd know since you're usually around the tiers." Arden kept his voice neutral. "It's clear." The technician leaned slightly to look past Arden. "You doing inspections off shift?" "Not today," Arden said. He didn't move from the doorway. "All right." The man took a step back, sensing Arden's boundary. "Control will follow up if anything else comes in. Stay dry out there." Arden closed the door and locked it. Lyra let out a small breath she had held too long. Marilla sank back against the pillows, relief and worry mixing in her face. "They'll notice I'm gone by midday," she said. "Not if I deal with it," Arden replied, walking back to them. "You're not losing your room over a shift supervisor who doesn't watch his own workers." Marilla watched him closely. "Why are you doing this? You don't know us." Arden sat on the edge of the chair again. "Because I was there when your daughter asked for help. That puts me in it whether I planned for it or not." She studied his face, trying to find any sign of hesitation. There wasn't any. Lyra settled beside her mother again and said quietly, "Can we stay here for today, just to rest?" Her tone carried something deeper than fear. It was the kind of request children made when they didn't want to admit they were scared to go home alone. Arden recognized it immediately. "You both stay," he said. "You're not going anywhere until she can stand without shaking." Marilla lowered her eyes. Her voice dropped. "If we stay, we can't go back tonight. It's too far for her to walk in the rain. And our room is cold. The heat panel broke last week." Arden didn't look away from her. "Then stay until you're both steady again." Lyra blinked at him, almost startled. "All of us. Here. For now," he said. You'll be warm. You'll eat properly. And nobody will collapse alone in a pump corridor. The simplicity of his tone made the offer feel solid, not dramatic. Marilla's hand trembled under the blanket. You're asking to take responsibility for us. I'm offering, he corrected. You decide. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted between her daughter and the steam rising from the broth. After a long moment, she whispered, if we stay, even one night, we should help with something. Food, cleaning, something. Arden's mouth lifted at one corner. You don't owe me labor. She met his eyes again. It's not debt. It's dignity. He respected the clarity in her voice. She wasn't trying to repay him. She wanted to stand beside him instead of beneath him. Then when you can walk, Arden said, we'll see what you want to help with. Lyra leaned against her mother's arm. Her voice softened. Mom, I like it here. Marilla stroked her daughter's hair. It's warm. That's why you like it. No, Lyra said quietly. It feels safe. The word struck both adults harder than she intended. Marilla's breath faltered. Arden's chest tightened. He hadn't planned on protecting anything beyond his basic duty, but hearing that made something shift inside him, solid, unavoidable. He stood and moved toward the cooking unit again. Eat your broth, he said. Both of you. I'll bring more food in a bit. Marilla watched him walk, taking in the way he moved, measured, careful with space, steady in a way she hadn't seen in years. When he returned with 2 fresh bowls, she looked at him with something different in her expression. Not trust yet, but something close. Arden, she said softly, thank you. He met her eyes. You needed help. I was there. That's enough. Lyra lifted her bowl to her lips, blew on the broth, and took a long sip. Her shoulders eased for the first time since the night before. Arden sat beside the bed, close enough to offer support if Marilla swayed, but not close enough to crowd her. Outside, the rain thickened again, tapping against the window in steady lines. Inside the small flat, the shift in their world had already begun. The rain turned into a steady curtain by the time midday approached, sliding down the narrow window in long, clear tracks. Arden stood near the door, fastening the last buckle of his coat. His movements were deliberate, almost silent. Marilla watched him from the bed, sitting upright now, wrapped in blankets with her legs tucked close for warmth. Lyra sat beside her, leaning lightly against her side. Arden pulled his gloves from the shelf. I need to check in at the harbor office, he said. If I don't show up at least once today, Control send someone knocking. Marilla's fingers tightened on the blanket. Will they come here? No, Arden said. The office only tracks my shift logs. They don't care where I sleep. He adjusted the strap across his chest. I'll tell them I'm taking a sick day. That will buy us time. Lyra sat straighter. Are you coming back? Arden paused halfway through tightening his glove. Yes, before afternoon cycle. His tone was matter-of-fact, not reassuring, but it eased something in the girl's face. She nodded, accepting the answer the way someone accepts a promise that doesn't need decoration. Marilla shifted beneath the blankets. If anyone asks why you're absent, won't that cause trouble? It won't, he said. I used personal leave twice in the last year. They owe me plenty more. He opened the door, testing the hallway for movement. It was empty. Before he stepped out, Marilla spoke again. Arden, thank you for giving us time to breathe. He didn't answer right away. His eyes went briefly to the floor, then back to hers. Rest while I'm gone. Both of you. He closed the door behind him with a soft click. Inside the flat, silence stretched. The heater hummed quietly. Lyra slid off the bed and went to the small window, hands pressed against the glass. Her breath fogged a small circle, and she wiped it clean with her palm. Marilla watched her daughter's shape. Come back here. Your feet are still cold. Lyra returned to the bed, but didn't sit. Do you think he's doing this because he wants something from us? Marilla considered the question carefully. He hasn't asked for anything. But men always do, Lyra said, voice small. Marilla lifted the blanket slightly and motioned her daughter closer. Lyra climbed onto the bed. Marilla wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. Arden is different. You felt it last night. Lyra rested her head against her mother's shoulder. I felt safe. That's why I was scared. That feeling doesn't happen here. Marilla brushed a strand of golden hair away from the girl's face. It's all right to feel safe. It doesn't mean we owe him anything. Lyra nodded without speaking. Marilla shifted her weight to sit more comfortably. Her body still ached, especially her legs, but the room was warm, and the shirt she wore held the faint scent of Arden's detergent and metal from the harbor. It felt strange to be wrapped in something so clean after years of cheap fabric and pump dust. A soft knock startled both of them. Marilla froze, clutching Lyra tighter. The knock came again, lighter this time. "No one knows we're here," Marilla whispered. "Maybe it's Arden," Lyra said. No, Marilla shook her head. He wouldn't knock like that. The knock came once more. Marilla pushed the blanket aside carefully and stood. Her legs wobbled at first, and she steadied herself on the wall. Lyra followed quietly, gripping the fabric of the shirt around Marilla's hip. Marilla reached the door and pressed her ear against it. A familiar voice spoke through the metal. "It's Rellin from the pumps. Heard something happen last night." Marilla tensed. Rellin was a midline cleaner, one of the few co-workers who occasionally helped her when supervisors weren't watching. Marilla whispered to Lyra, "Go sit on the bed. Don't talk." Lyra obeyed, padding across the room and climbing onto the mattress. Marilla unlocked the door halfway. Rellin stood outside, soaked head to toe. Her dark hair was tied up messily, strips escaping down the sides of her face. Her uniform clung to her arms and chest. "You weren't at morning roll call," Rellin said. "The supervisor couldn't find you." Marilla kept the blanket tight around herself. "Something happened during my shift." "I know," Rellin said. "A vendor at the Arch told me you collapsed. They said a man carried you away. I came to see if you were alive." Marilla hesitated. "I'm alive." Rellin leaned past the doorway and spotted Lyra on the bed. "I figured your girl might be scared. I brought some warm Zyron slices." She held up a small container wrapped in cloth. Steam leaked out from under the lid. Lyra perked up at the smell, sweet, warm, slightly tangy. Marilla accepted the container. "Thank you." Rellin nodded at the shirt Marilla was wearing. "Is that his?" Marilla tugged the collar up instinctively. "He found me behind Valve 7. I don't remember much after that." Rellin raised an eyebrow. "So you're staying here?" "Just until I can stand without falling," Marilla said. Rellin looked at her carefully. "Then be careful. The supervisor is angry. He said if you don't return today, your place is flagged. I told him you should check the corridor first before claiming you're lazy." She wiped rain from her forehead. "You didn't like that." Marilla swallowed. "I can't go back yet." "I know." Rellin lowered her voice. "Let him be angry. I'll cover what I can today. Maybe it buys you time." Marilla felt a sting behind her eyes. "Thank you." Rellin shrugged, embarrassed by the emotion. "Just get better." "And the man helping you?" "He seems steady." Marilla nodded once. "Yes." Rellin stepped back. "Then stay put. I'll come tomorrow with news." She turned and hurried down the hall. Marilla closed the door and leaned her forehead against it for a moment. Relief washed through her in a heavy wave. Lyra walked to her and slipped a small hand into hers. "She knows we're here," Lyra whispered. "It's all right," Marilla said. "Rellin won't tell anyone who shouldn't know." They went back to the bed. Marilla opened the container. Steam rose, carrying the scent of sweet Zyron fruit. Lyra took a slice. It was warm, soft, and coated with a thin layer of syrup. Marilla sat down beside her, forcing her legs to stay steady. "Mom," Lyra said quietly, "are we really staying here?" "For now," Marilla answered, "until I can walk to the pumps without collapsing." Lyra hesitated, then spoke in a whisper too thin to hide. "If we leave, will everything feel cold again?" Marilla froze. The question wasn't about temperature. She wrapped her arm around the girl and held her close. "When we leave," Marilla said softly, "we'll carry whatever warmth we find." Lyra pressed her face against her mother's side. Her grip tightened. The door unlocked again, this time from the outside. Arden stepped in, damp from the rain, coat dripping onto the floor. He took in the scene. The open container of fruit, Lyra curled against Marilla sitting up straighter than she had all morning. His eyes settled on Marilla. "You stood," he said. She nodded. "Barely." He set down a bag of fresh tier rations and a small heater coil. "Good." Tomorrow, you stand longer. Lyra smiled despite herself. He came back fast. Arden removed his gloves, shaking off water. Office barely looked at me. I signed a leave form and left. Marilla watched him quietly. The room felt different now that he had returned. Steadier, though she didn't say it out loud. Arden hung his coat near the heater. Did anything happen while I was gone? Marilla exchanged a glance with Lyra. Someone came to check on us. A co-worker. She won't cause trouble. Arden nodded once. Good. Then we keep today simple. You rest. She eats. And I'll handle the rest. Lyra picked up another Zyron slice. Does that mean we're staying again tonight? Arden met her eyes. You're not going anywhere until your mother can walk without shaking. Marilla let out a slow breath. Not resistance. Acceptance. Arden stepped closer. And when she can walk, we'll decide the next step together. For the first time since waking, Marilla didn't look away. She held his gaze, steady and unguarded. Then we stay, she said. At least for today. Good, Arden replied. Then we start from here. Arden set the ration bag on the counter and unpacked it with steady, precise movements. Containers of dried grain strips, sealed packs of Kiri's meat, a pouch of brewed Ferlin seed concentrate, and 2 small loaves of tier bread were arranged in a neat row. Lyra sat cross-legged on the bed, eating another warm Zyron slice, her eyes drifting between the food and her mother's face as if checking that Marilla was still awake. Marilla pushed herself upright without using the wall this time. Her legs shook, but she held herself steady. Arden noticed it from across the room. How long until you can stand without bracing? He asked. Longer than today, Marilla said quietly, but shorter than a week. We'll measure it, he said, not guess. He began heating a pan over the small stove and sliced the Kiri's meat into thin strips. The sizzle filled the flat, mixing with the faint sweetness from the Zyron fruit container. Lyra's eyes drifted toward the stove. Is that for lunch? She asked. For all of us, Arden said. Sit at the table. She slid off the bed and padded barefoot to the table. Marilla followed more slowly, her hand brushing the wall only twice for support. Arden watched, but didn't offer his arm. She was doing this herself. When she reached the chair and sat down, she exhaled sharply, hiding it behind a steady expression. You're pushing yourself, Arden said, turning the meat strips so they browned evenly. It's the only way I get better, she replied. He nodded. That answer, stripped of hesitation, told him she intended to pull herself back piece by piece. Arden carried the steaming pan to the table and set it down carefully. He placed tier bread beside it, tore open the grain strip packet, and pushed the food toward them. Eat first, he said. Marilla pulled a piece of bread apart and layered a strip of meat inside. Lyra copied her, though her hands were smaller and clumsier. When Marilla took the first bite, she closed her eyes briefly. The warmth and salt of the meat hit her system fast. Her shoulders eased. Arden ate last. He sat opposite Marilla, his posture relaxed but attentive, watching how she moved her fingers, how she balanced her elbows, how long she paused when chewing. Lyra ate quickly, hunger pushing her forward, crumbs falling on her knees. Marilla slowed her daughter with a light touch on her arm. Small bites, she murmured. You'll eat more that way. Arden stood to refill 3 small cups with warm water from the kettle. He placed one in front of Marilla. Drink it slowly, he said. Your voice is raw. She wrapped her fingers around the cup, warming her hands. Arden about work today. Relin can only cover so much. They'll check the logs by evening. Then we fix it before then, Arden said. Lyra lifted her head. Ow! Arden wiped his hands on a cloth and leaned against the counter. Harbor Control owes me favors. I've redirected light crews for years when storms made the upper tiers unsafe. If I ask for a small delay report, a shift stall notice, your supervisor will have to verify it before flagging anyone. Marilla frowned. You'd file something for me? It's not for you, Arden said. It's for the system to get its facts straight. She studied him. And if the supervisor lies, then he'll have to do it in writing, Arden replied. I'll pull the pump corridor logs myself. The certainty in his voice made her grip the cup tighter. He wasn't speaking like someone doing a favor. He was speaking like someone taking responsibility. Lyra swung her legs under the table. Mom, if Arden fixes the warnings, can we really stay until you get strong? Marilla reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. We stay where we're safe. Right now, this is the safest place. Lyra nodded once and returned to her food with small, careful bites. Arden cleared the table when they finished. Lyra tried to help, but he stopped her with a soft tap on her wrist. You rest too, he said. I'm not tired, she insisted. Sit anyway. She blinked, then obeyed. Marilla shifted in her chair, watching the dynamic between them. You're used to giving orders, she said to Arden. He rinsed the pan under a thin stream of water. Used to them being followed, yes. What did you do before the lights? She asked. Arden dried the pan with a cloth. Station security. Different colony. Marilla felt the answer settle, something unresolved in her mind. His way of standing near the door, the measured speech, the constant scanning, it all fit now. Why did you leave? She asked. Arden placed the pan on the rack and met her eyes. Too many people were labeled problems instead of people. I got tired of that list. The flat grew quiet for a moment. Lyra walked to the bed and sat down cross-legged, curling her fingers around one of the thermal stones still warm from the morning. Marilla rose from her chair with a slow, steady breath. I should try walking more, she said. Not far, Arden replied, but show me your balance. She took 3 steps toward him. Her legs shook at the third, and she reached out instinctively. Arden stepped forward and caught her elbow before she fell. She steadied herself against his hand, her breath close to his collar. Their proximity froze both of them. Her fingers curled lightly around his wrist. Reflex, not intent, but she didn't pull away. Her chest rose and fell rapidly under his shirt, and a faint flush warmed her cheeks. I'm fine, she whispered. You're close, Arden said. Not fine. He guided her back to the bed with a supportive hold at her waist, firm enough to help, careful enough not to take over. When she sat down, she exhaled shakily. You're warm, she murmured, almost to herself. You were cold all night, he said. Your body is adjusting. Lyra looked up at them. Can we stay again tonight? Arden answered before Marilla could. Yes. Marilla glanced at him. You didn't ask if I agreed. I didn't need to, Arden said. You can barely stand. And your room is colder than this tier. Marilla's lips parted, but she didn't argue. She looked at her daughter instead. Then we stay tonight. Lyra's shoulders relaxed. Arden stepped to the door. I'm checking the tier office. I'll be back before second cycle. If anyone knocks, don't open unless it's me. Marilla nodded. We won't. He put on his coat again, pulling the hood low, and unlocked the door. Before leaving, he looked at them one more time. Marilla sitting upright, Lyra leaning against her side, the room warmer than when he had found them. Then he stepped into the hall and closed the door behind him. Inside, Lyra tugged gently at Marilla's sleeve. Mom, yes. If he keeps helping us, does that mean we belong with him? Marilla smoothed her daughter's hair with a slow stroke. It means he didn't leave us behind. Lyra leaned into her. I like that. Marilla pulled her close, her voice barely above a breath. So do I. The rain outside grew heavier, but inside the flat, the air held a different warmth, steady, grounding, and growing thicker. Each hour Arden stayed part of their world. Arden returned just after second cycle, rain dripping off his hood as he stepped into the flat. Marilla and Lyra were on the floor near the heater. Lyra had arranged a small set of folded cloths into a circle, treating them like tiny seating pads, while Marilla sat upright with her legs crossed, her back no longer touching the wall. The color in her skin had deepened, and her posture held more strength than that morning. She looked up when Arden entered. You're soaked. It's raining harder than before, he said, shrugging off his coat. He hung it near the heater where the drops hissed softly against the warm stone. How's your balance? Better, she said, still shaky. Lyra rushed to him and tugged at his sleeve. We made a thing. Arden raised an eyebrow. A thing. A welcome circle, she said, pointing proudly to the arrangement of cloths on the floor. Mom says our people do this when someone protects the home. Marilla's cheeks warmed. It's a simple practice. It's meant to thank someone without creating debt. Arden tested the pads with his foot. Looks complicated for something simple. Lyra grinned. You have to sit inside it. Arden hesitated just long enough for Lyra to look worried, then stepped into the circle and sat cross-legged. The cloths shifted under his boots. Lyra crouched beside him and tapped her finger twice against the floor. "That means we're under the same roof today," she explained. Marilla watched the interaction from a short distance. The ritual wasn't elaborate, just precise, a brief gesture used among Orenyi families to mark temporary unity. She had not performed it in years. Arden looked at her. "Does this make me part of it?" "For today," she said quietly. "It doesn't bind anything. It's a form of respect." He nodded once. "I can accept that." Lyra climbed into his lap without warning, her small body pressing warm against his chest. Arden steadied her automatically, a hand landing at her back. She smelled faintly of Zyron fruit. Her voice was close to his collar. "Mom said you came back for us. That means we can trust you." Marilla stood and stepped closer, her hands resting lightly at her sides. Arden's eyes shifted briefly to her legs, still unsteady, still recovering, but she held her weight better now. "Lyra," Marilla said gently, "let him breathe." Lyra slid off Arden's lap and returned to her mother's side, still smiling. Arden rose, dusting his palms on his pants. "I checked the office," he said. "Your supervisor sent an incomplete shift record. I flagged it and attached a delay report from Harbor Control. It gives us 2 days." Marilla stared at him, surprised. "You got them to approve that?" "I didn't ask permission," Arden said. "I submitted it with my name on the line. They won't question it if they know what's good for them." Lyra's eyes widened. "You fought them." Arden shook his head. "Not a fight, just paperwork with teeth." Marilla exhaled slowly. 2 days, that means I won't lose the room yet." "You won't lose anything," Arden said. "Not while I'm handling the logs." She watched him carefully. "Why are you doing this?" Truly, Arden turned toward the small kitchen and began heating water. "Because none of this should have happened, and because you didn't lie down and give up. Most people do." Marilla blinked, unsure how to answer. He continued preparing food. Simple tasks with steady rhythm. Grain strips poured into the pot. A handful of dried herbs from a tin he rarely used. A small block of Kiri's fat dropped in to melt. Lyra hopped onto a chair, swinging her legs. "It smells good. Better than ration paste," Arden said. Marilla leaned against the counter for support. "Arden, about yesterday." She paused. "When you carried me." He stopped stirring and looked up. "I don't remember much," she said. "Just the cold and the sound of your boots." Her fingers slid along the counter. "Did you think I wouldn't wake up?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "I thought your breathing was too shallow." She swallowed, looking down at her bare feet. "You didn't have to take that risk." "I did." Their eyes met again. This time neither of them looked away. Lyra broke the silence with a small, tired sound. "Mom, I think I need to lie down." The girl's shoulders slumped, exhaustion finally catching up. Arden walked over and lifted her with one smooth motion. She rested her head against his chest, body limp with trust. He carried her to the bed and set her gently under the blanket. "Sleep," he said. She nodded once and closed her eyes. Marilla watched from the doorway of the alcove. Arden stepped back, giving space, but remained close enough in case the girl stirred. "She's not usually this open with people," Marilla said. Arden shrugged lightly. "She's had to be cautious." Marilla stepped closer, her voice low to avoid waking Lyra. "You're steady in ways I didn't expect." Arden leaned against the side of the alcove. "You expected something else?" "I expected you to help once and step back." Her eyes traveled slowly across his face. "Most men don't stay when things get complicated." Arden's voice lowered. "I'm not most men." The sentence lingered between them. Marilla's breathing tightened slightly. She stepped into the alcove to adjust Lyra's blanket, brushing her daughter's hair away from her face. When she turned back, Arden was closer, not touching, but near enough that she felt his presence at a different level. Her hand brushed his chest as she stepped past him. She froze at the accidental contact. His shirt was warm. His body was solid. Her breath hitched. Arden didn't move. "You're still unsteady," he said quietly. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice betrayed her. He reached out, not to hold her, but to steady the wall near her shoulder. close enough for her to feel the heat of him, close enough to notice the faint scent of metal and the rain on his coat. "Sit," he said, "before you fall again." She didn't argue. She walked to the bed and sat carefully. Arden followed and crouched beside her. "You need rest," he said. "You do too," she answered. He shook his head. "I'll rest when I know you're not collapsing at the next step." Her lips parted slightly, a small, involuntary reaction. Arden stood. "Eat with me once she wakes up. After that, we assess your strength." Marilla watched him move toward the kitchen, shoulders broad under the damp shirt, steps measured, every action deliberate. For the first time since arriving, she let her guard loosen fully. She whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe we really are meant to stay." Arden finished stirring the pot, letting the steam rise in steady waves that warmed the small kitchen. The flat was quiet except for the soft roll of thunder outside and the low hum of the heater. Marilla sat on the edge of the bed, watching her daughter sleep. The blankets lifted and fell with Lyra's breathing, her small fingers still curled loosely around one of the thermal stones. Arden brought 2 bowls to the table, grain stew thickened with Kiri's fat and cut strips of meat, and set them down. When he turned toward Marilla, she was already trying to stand. He walked to her before she could brace herself on the wall. "Slow," he said. "I can walk," she replied, steadying her feet beneath her. Her knees wavered briefly, but she corrected her stance with controlled effort. Arden didn't touch her, but he stayed close enough to intervene. She crossed the short distance to the table, gripping the back of the chair before lowering herself into it. The oversized black shirt she wore shifted at her collarbone, revealing a bit of her shoulder before she pulled it back in place. He sat across from her. For the first time that day, they were facing each other without Lyra between them. Marilla studied the bowl. "This is more than you eat for yourself. It's what you need," Arden said. She dipped the spoon, brought it to her lips, and the warmth eased through her body. The taste of Kiri's fat, herbs, and grain grounded her. She swallowed slowly, letting the heat settle in her chest. "Arden," she said after a moment, "Relin told me something I didn't say earlier." Arden's gaze lifted. "What?" She said, "The supervisor is angry because I reported the broken panel last week. He didn't file it. He ignored it. If I collapsed under it, it makes him look irresponsible." She tightened her grip on the spoon. "He'll try to shift the blame onto me." Arden didn't react outwardly, but the air between them changed. "Then I'll keep the logs," he said. "You won't speak to him until I do. You can't protect us from everything." "I don't need to," he replied. "Just the parts that would break you again." She held his stare. There was no hesitation in his voice, no uncertainty, only a practical promise. Marilla set the spoon down and brushed her palm along the edge of the bowl. "You speak like someone used to taking responsibility for others." "I am," he said, "and you're not a burden." Marilla looked away, throat tightening. Arden leaned slightly forward. "Tell me something. When was the last time you ate 3 real meals in one day?" She blinked. "Before Lyra was born." "And when was the last time someone carried you out of danger?" he asked. Her fingers curled around the fabric of his shirt she was wearing. "Never." "Then you're overdue for both," he said. A faint, unsteady warmth spread across her face. She lowered her eyes to hide it. Arden finished eating and stood. "Try walking again." She pushed the chair back, bracing her hands on the table. When she rose, he stayed nearby but didn't reach for her. Her steps were small but stronger than earlier. Her balance improved with each shift of weight. "You're getting steadier," he said. "Because you're watching," she answered. He didn't deny it. She reached the wall by the heater and rested her hand against it. The heat washed over her skin, relaxing the tension in her shoulders. She pushed off the wall and returned to the table, stopping in front of Arden. "If I keep improving like this," she said, "Lyra and I won't need to stay long." Arden's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did, like a muscle tightening beneath the surface. "You'll stay until you can manage without falling," he said. "Not a day less. And after that, we decide," he said. Her breath caught quietly. She looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "You speak like we're already part of your life." "You are today," Arden said. "And tomorrow. We'll handle the rest when you're stable." The room settled into a quiet that felt different, heavier but steady. Lyra stirred on the bed, rolling on her side. Marilla walked to her daughter, her steps slower now, but controlled. She sat beside the girl and adjusted the blanket. Arden approached the alcove, stopping a short distance behind Marilla. He spoke quietly. "You're improving faster than I expected." She looked over her shoulder. "You expected less from me?" "I expected exhaustion," he said. "But you have more strength than you know." He crouched beside her, his voice low. "After Lyra wakes, I'll take you both outside for fresh air. Not far, just the walkway. You need to move. She needs light." Marilla touched her daughter's cheek gently. "She's been afraid to go outside alone." "She won't be alone," Arden said. Marilla turned toward him fully, their faces close. Her breath brushed lightly against his skin. She didn't pull back. Neither did he. "Arden," she said quietly, "what do you want from us?" He held her gaze. "Nothing. But I won't lie. I don't plan to stay distant." Her lips parted. "Then what do you plan?" "First," he said, "I plan to help you walk without holding the walls. Then I plan to help you keep your room. After that, whatever you choose." Marilla absorbed that, her pulse visible at her neck. "And if I choose to stay with you until I'm sure I won't collapse again, then you stay with me." They didn't move for several seconds. Lyra's voice broke the moment. "Mom, water." Marilla exhaled and stood carefully. Arden rose with her but stepped slightly back, giving space again. Lyra rubbed her eyes, half awake. Arden brought a cup of warm water. Lyra drank it slowly, her small fingers curling around the rim. When she finished, Arden looked between them. "Get ready. We're stepping outside for a short walk." Lyra perked up. "Outside? With you?" "Yes." Marilla steadied herself on the bed. "I'll try." Arden extended his hand, not insisting, just offering. This time she took it. Arden opened the door to the hallway, letting a faint draft slip inside. The rain hadn't stopped, but it had quieted into a steady whisper against the metal walls. The walkway outside smelled of damp concrete and cold water drifting down from the upper tiers. Marilla paused at the threshold, her fingers gripping Arden's hand with more force than she intended. Lyra stood on her other side, holding onto her mother's shirt. Arden stepped out first to make sure the path was clear. "No rush," he said. "We move at your pace." Marilla nodded and took a slow step forward. Her bare feet met the cold walkway, and she inhaled sharply. The sensation grounded her. She tightened her grip on Arden's hand, and he adjusted his hold so she could lean if she needed to. Lyra walked slightly ahead, testing each patch of floor as if ensuring it was safe for her mother. She stopped at the railing and looked down at the lower levels where water dripped from pipes in long, silver lines. "It smells different outside," Lyra said. "Cleaner." "It's the rain pushing the pump smell down," Arden said. They walked the length of the walkway, staying near the wall. Marilla's legs trembled twice, but didn't give out. When she stopped, Arden stepped in front of her, steadying her with one hand on her waist. His touch was firm but careful, his thumb resting just above her hip bone, close enough for her to feel the subtle warmth of his skin. "You're holding yourself better," he said. "It feels like learning how to walk again," she answered. "That's exactly what it is." Lyra tugged at Marilla's sleeve. "Can we go a little farther?" Arden looked at Marilla. "Your choice." She took another deep breath and nodded. "A little farther." They reached the bend of the walkway, where a small alcove sheltered a maintenance console. Arden checked the corner before letting them approach. Inside the alcove, a narrow bench sat under dim lighting. He gestured toward it. "Sit for a moment." Marilla lowered herself onto the bench. Lyra climbed beside her, pressing her shoulder against her mother's arm. The bench was cold, but the closeness warmed them. Arden remained standing in front of them, arms folded loosely, watching Marilla's breathing and the tension in her posture. Lyra looked up suddenly. "Arden, last night I was scared you'd leave. I didn't want to sleep alone again." Marilla's eyes softened, and she brushed a hand through Lyra's hair. But Lyra wasn't finished. "Are you staying with us every night until Mom is strong?" Arden lowered his arms. He crouched in front of her, speaking plainly. "Yes, I'm here. You won't sleep alone again." Lyra reached forward and touched his wrist. "Promise?" "I already promised," he said. Marilla watched the exchange. Something warm and heavy settling in her chest. She hadn't realized how deeply Lyra needed that assurance, and she hadn't realized how naturally Arden gave it. Marilla placed her hand gently on Lyra's back. "You needed him more than you said." Lyra nodded. "I didn't want to sound weak." "You weren't weak," Marilla said. "You were cold and alone." Arden stood again. "Let's head back. You've walked enough for today." Marilla braced one hand on the bench and rose slowly. Her knees wobbled, and Arden stepped close, sliding his hand to the small of her back. She steadied herself, but she didn't move away from his touch. Lyra took her mother's hand, and the three of them walked together through the rain-softened corridor. Inside the flat, the warmth washed over them immediately. Marilla exhaled, relieved. Lyra shook droplets from her hair and ran to the heater. Arden closed the door and locked it. "Sit," he said to Marilla. "You pushed harder than planned." She sank onto the bed, holding the edge with both hands. He knelt in front of her to check her balance. Her legs trembled but didn't buckle. He nodded. "You're improving," he said. "Tomorrow, we go farther." Marilla stared at him for a long moment. "You act like we're doing this together." "We are," he replied. Lyra returned with a blanket and climbed beside her mother, curling against her side. Marilla draped the blanket over them both. The movement lifted the hem of Arden's shirt she wore, revealing the curve of her thigh before she pulled it back down. Arden averted his eyes, not out of discomfort but respect, and walked to the stove to prepare something warm. He heated broth again, adding new strips of Kiri's meat and a pinch of dried herbs. The smell filled the room, soft and grounding. Marilla watched him from the bed. "Arden." He turned his head slightly. "Yes." "What happens after 2 days?" she asked quietly. "When the paperwork buys us no more time." Arden ladled broth into a bowl. "By then, you'll be strong enough to stand without help. And once you can stand, you can choose." "Choose what?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes held something fragile. He carried the bowl to her and set it in her hands, careful not to touch her fingers unless she allowed it. "Whether you go back to your old life," he said softly, "or build a new one with us." Marilla's breath caught. She stared at him, searching for some sign of hesitation. There was none. His eyes were calm, certain, as if he had already accepted whatever choice she made. "I don't want to go back to being alone on the lower levels," she said. "Then don't," he replied. Lyra, half awake against her mother's arm, opened her eyes just long enough to whisper one small line, soft, unfiltered, painful in its simplicity. "Please don't send us away." Marilla's hand shook. Arden's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in a quiet, protective resolve. "I'm not sending you anywhere," he said. "Neither of you." Marilla's eyes filled, but she blinked the moisture away before it could fall. She wasn't crying. She was breathing for the first time without fear. Arden stood close, near enough for her to sense the warmth of him again. "When you're ready," he said, voice low, "we'll talk about what staying means." Marilla set the bowl aside and met his gaze fully. Her voice was a whisper, steady and direct. "I think I already know what it means." Marilla did not look away from Arden. The room was quiet except for the soft rumble of rain against the window panel. Lyra slept again, her head resting on Marilla's thigh, the blanket rising and falling with her breathing. Arden remained close, standing near the edge of the bed, his posture steady and open, not pushing her, not stepping back either. Marilla shifted slightly, enough to face him fully. "You said we'd talk when I was ready," she said. "I'm ready now." Arden's eyes moved briefly to Lyra, making sure she slept, then returned to Marilla. "Tell me what you want." She inhaled slowly, gathering the courage she never had the chance to use in her old life. "I want us to stay here, not for safety, not because we need somewhere to hide. I want to stay because it feels right." Arden lowered himself onto the chair beside the bed. "Then stay." She tightened her hold on the blanket, grounding herself. "You're saying it like it's simple." "It is simple," he said. "You're not a guest. You're not temporary." Her chest rose with a careful breath. "Then what are we?" Arden leaned forward slightly, forearms resting on his knees. "If you choose it, we're a household, a unit. You, Lyra, and me." He paused, choosing his words with clarity. And if your people have a ritual for that, whatever binds a family, I'll learn it. Marilla swallowed, her throat tightening. We do. It's called a share mark, a small strip of dyed cloth tied around the wrist. It means shared living, shared meals, shared protection. Not marriage, but close. Then bring the cloth, he said. I'll wear it. A quiet tremor went through her body. She stared down at her hands, then at her daughter, then back at him. You're sure? I'm sure. Marilla stood carefully, one hand steadying herself on the wall. Arden rose instantly, ready to catch her as she faltered. She didn't. She crossed the room, opened her torn work bag, and pulled out a thin roll of blue gold fabric, soft, narrow, frayed at the edges. She held it against her chest for a moment, then approached Arden again. He extended his wrist. Marilla wrapped the cloth around it, tying a small knot on the inside of his arm. Her fingertips brushed his skin, lingering for half a second longer than needed. When she finished, she lowered her hand, but didn't step back. He raised his other hand slowly, giving her enough time to move away if she wanted. She didn't. He wrapped the remaining cloth around her wrist, tying it with firm, careful fingers. The knot sat against her pulse. She looked at the small band, then at him. That means we live together. Then we live together, he said. Silence followed, steady, warm, and full. Lyra stirred again, eyes barely open. She saw the cloth on Arden's wrist first, then a matching one on her mother. Her face lit up with a tired, relieved smile. So we stay? Marilla cupped her daughter's cheek. We stay. Lyra let out a small breath and leaned into her mother. Good. I didn't want to leave. Arden sat beside them on the bed. You're home now, he said. Marilla touched Lyra's hair. We really are. As the weight of the moment settled, Marilla's expression changed slightly. A hand drifted to her stomach, resting there with a soft, startled pause. Arden noticed the gesture immediately. You all right? He asked. She nodded, but her voice came out quiet. I've been feeling different. For a few days. She hesitated, her fingers pressing lightly against her abdomen. A warm heaviness. It's early, but in my people, we feel the first signs sooner. Arden held still, letting her speak at her own pace. I don't know for certain, she continued, but my body hasn't felt like this since before Lyra. Arden's breath deepened. He didn't speak too soon. Do you think you're? She nodded once, slow and honest. Maybe. Lyra blinked sleepily. Is something happening? Marilla stroked her daughter's head. Not yet, little one, but maybe soon. Arden reached out and placed his hand beside hers on the bed, close but not touching until she made the move. She slid her fingers over his, firm and sure. What does this mean for you? He asked quietly. Marilla looked at him without fear. It means I don't go anywhere. It means this is where we build a life. He squeezed her hand. Then we build it. The rain softened outside, turning into a light patter against the window. Lyra curled closer to Marilla, eyes drifting shut again. Marilla leaned into Arden's shoulder, not collapsing, not seeking rescue, but choosing closeness because it was hers to choose. Arden rested his cheek gently against her hair, and the small space between them disappeared. For the first time since the night she collapsed behind the pump valve, Marilla felt something steady and true settle deep inside her. A future, a real one. She whispered one final line, barely louder than the rain. I'm not afraid anymore. Arden tightened his arm around her. You don't have to be. And with that, the three of them stayed together on the bed. A family formed not by desperation, but by choice, bound by cloth, warmth, and the quiet promise of a new life taking shape inside her.